Hey there team, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my overview of Rogue Waters. So for those not across it, I do overviews on this channel. I have a look at the first 2 hours of a game because it's a Steam refund window. Steam says that you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not in that time, and I broadly would agree as a rule, and say that 20 hours in, you usually don't change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's a short punchy video, broad strokes info, keep it around 10 minutes, and then you can make up your mind on your own. So, Rogue Waters, what do we reckon? I think this is really cool, actually. There's a sort of wholesome charm to it. I mean, who doesn't like pirates, but especially turn-based combat sort of pirates with some rogue-like elements mixed in, but a lot of kind of overarching meta progression in your characters. So it's got its own touch of permanency that's a bit more than what you might call a pure roguelike. It's being developed by Ice Code Games, who I looked up, and they did Hard West 2. Now, I'm a huge fan of Hard West 1 with all of its problems, and while I only played a little bit of number 2, and it was a fairly big departure from the first game, it was really good actually. It was quite solid, and you can feel a lot of the DNA from that in this. In many ways, this is a spiritual successor to a lot of the moving parts to Hard West 2. So maybe you didn't know that, and maybe you were a fan of it, and that's enough for you to get this. Specifically, the way that they sort of do a lot of the text and narrative, and even just the font base and the coloring and all that. Like, it does immediately remind me of Hard West 2. Look, essentially, you're running your pirate ship. You have a little prologue where it's a sort of typical copy-paste revenge setup. But the idea is that you're this kind of immortal pirate with an ever sort of respawning kind of thread, you could just call it. It's essentially the setup for the fact that you're going to do a run, kind of almost micro runs, especially in the beginning. I've wiped many times on just normal difficulty, and then you reset, you go again with your captain leveling up as you go. You hire on like crewmates, and you also have a mechanic where you've got sort of plus ones. You've got these little just deckhand pirate pawns that don't level up per se, but they help round out your roster, especially in the early days when you're still building up a sort of secondary hero character. It kind of reminds me of Mechanicus a little bit, how you could get the servitors to fill in the gaps, and they were sort of this supplementary meat shield kind of fodder unit, and it's cool. And so yeah, through the course of it, you have them rounding out your crew, you have your permanent captain, and you kind of recruit in other dudes, and it has like a wound system, so everyone has their health, and if they fall in combat, they will lose a health pip permanently, or pseudo-permanently, let's say for the run at least. So if your dude had 4 health and he goes down for the rest of the run, he'll have 3 health, and so on until they're permanently eliminated. So there's this attrition component that your run is going to run out, because you're going to run out of both meat shield little dudes, and your main characters are just going to get chipped down over the course of multiple battles. Now that carries over between playthroughs, but all you got to do is just rest them up in a tavern thing, and they're all immortally touched as well, as goes the narrative. So while your dude might eventually go down to 0 HP and you can't field him in a run, you just leave him in a tavern. So no one truly dies, no one important at least. It's very cool actually. So yeah, it has more of a permanency progression, dare I say RPG component to it, layered on top of more traditional roguelike. So yeah, you've got the main quest that you're running through, but you can also do side quest things, little mini runs, and they have that Slay the Spire template as a sort of top layer. You pick between, 3 ships that you want to battle, or you've got events and shops and all that sort of stuff, and you kind of just go up this corridor. A battle will play out where you have like a boarding phase where it's the 2 ships siding off in a couple of turn-based things, and you have command points. In the beginning you only have 2, so effectively you can fire 2 cannons, and you want to sort of, shoot their cannons or take out their crew as well to soften them up, because then you go into the second phase after just like 2 or 3 turns of the boarding phase or the ship battle phase, whatever you want to call it. But then you end up on the ship fighting on the deck, as it were, and it's really clever. It's really positioning heavy. Like, your characters very much have the limited XCOM moveset. They've got 1 move and they've got 1 attack, and the attack ends a turn. They can also do a pseudo Overwatch where they'll sort of armor up and heal a HP, and a lot of the damage is just like 1 pip, and it progresses forward. So it has this kind of fencing vibe, this mouthfeel. So if you have just 1v1 on the deck, your dude will attack, do 1 damage, push him back, and close the gap. And so, it gives you that sort of that Princess Bride swashbuckling swordsmanship theme. But the real magic comes to it when you're trying to push them up against edges of the ship or against cargo, or essentially you're trying to push them into unmovable terrain, in which case they get compounding damage from there to the point where you can even push them off the edge of the ship in the sort of death animation. Now, if there are diagonal paths, like say you push him into a barrel, but there's still diagonally left and right behind the dude, he will push diagonally. And same thing, you can push them into dudes, friend and foe. You gotta be careful. I've actually killed friendlies by pushing dudes into my friendlies. So it becomes less about just charging headlong and more about trying to get the angle, trying to line up multiple guys. So you got a little bit of a domino effect. And compound upon that, everyone gets their abilities as they level up. There's different classes, like I've got a spear maiden that can skewer multiple dudes with her attack. And then all the upgrades that you put on your ship through the course of a run. It's not just cannons, but you can do things that like spawn ropes when you do the boarding phase. So they're these modules, they're not part of the ship fight per se, or the cannon fight, and more about the on-foot swordsman fight. And you can give them little ropes to swing around on to create mobility to get around dudes, and there's a lot of bottlenecking and all that. And it's like, at first blush, you're like, okay, it seems like a very small arena, the deck of these ships to be fighting on, but it's very cleverly constructed, what with, you know, boxes and crap in the way and mainmasts and so on. And so, you know, you're bottlenecking. You can potentially like hold off a whole bunch of dudes by holding down an area and just sort of going into block mode while the other guys work a different angle. There are some variants of these battles, obviously different ship sizes. Sometimes all you guys board along one side or just from the fore or aft. But you've got other things like you can do port battles where it's more about trying to extract from an infinite wave-based thing. So it's got all the trappings. What's really interesting in the more long term is you can change your difficulty at any time and it reflects more like a torment level of a Diablo 3 type thing. So I'm on normal, and normal's pretty tough. Like you wipe pretty quickly into a lot of these runs, but it is very liberal with the XP and the meta progression. And so I'm upgrading my ship and my dudes and all that, and it doesn't feel like too cop out, which actually on that point is interesting because I don't particularly like when a game outsources a lot of the meta progression. I use The Last Spell as a great example of a game that really got the pacing wrong. And I think that's because it makes the runs too long. A run in The Last Spell will go for an hour, and then you have to outsource a lot of your upgrading in the meta progression of the roguelite model. In this, you might have a run that only goes for 5 minutes and get smashed in the second combat. That's not really uncommon in the beginning. So it doesn't really hurt that much that the runs are stop-start, and so the progression's coming hard and fast. But yes, on the torment level things, I've got like, you know, easy, medium, hard. I think hard 1, and you can scroll through it and it goes up to extreme bloody 10 or something like that. There's like 10 different difficulty levels locked away, and I think the precondition is you have to beat a run on the previous difficulty to turn it up. And same thing, they essentially increase the enemy density, the enemy type, damage and all that, but you get better XP as you go. So I quite like that sort of thread. I might be the only one, but that's one of the things that I actually quite enjoyed about the infinite loop component of Diablo 3 was that torment levels setup. But yeah, all in all, what a cool little game. It's all voice acted and it's got writing as much as you'd think, and it very much captures that kind of charming, dare I say, like I don't want to say Disney pirating, but it does sort of feel like it has that charm of a Pirates of the Caribbean type thing. The swashbuckling of old, not this grim dark nonsense or anything like that. Anyway, I really enjoyed my time with it, and it's gone on the list to put some more time into it in the future. Anyway, team, I might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.